We'll go ahead and get started. It's wonderful to see everyone this morning. Special shout out to my parents who came all the way from Chicago to join us and give beer for this year.
I was wondering who that nice lady gave out the sheets for you. She said, for his mother, his parents.
So if you enjoyed today's shir, you know who to thank. Okay, today's morning Beit Midrash program in Rechavia is dedicated for the 2026 academic year. L'Iui Nishmat Daniel ben David and Limud bat Avram Strauss and Mordechai ben Moshe and Reisel bat Yosef Meir Marcus, Zichronam Livracha, parents of Judy and Menachem Marcus. Today's morning of loading is dedicated to Refuat Asher Zelig Eliezer ben Liba. Should have a quick and speedy recovery.
Amen.
Okay, today I thought it would be important to talk about what's going on in the news. Last week we were driving home from the shir, and my wife said to me, she said, "You have to take a video of this. Are you looking what's going on?" We were driving past, and all of a sudden there's lines and lines of cars, tractors and farmers and all types of different vehicles blocking the road. And Baruch Hashem, we're going the other way, so it wasn't so terrible. But for those who were trying to get home or those who were trying to go to work, it was a big nuisance. And for those who have been watching the news, know that there's a big hafganah. It's not the only hafganah. There have been many, many hafganot going on. Protests, they block off Highway 1, and you see farmers, they're dumping milk everywhere. What's going on? What's all this about? And unfortunately, I think it's very, very challenging when we see politics that people are so up in arms. It's very hard. And I think both sides have what to rely on. There's both what to talk about on both sides. Both sides are justified a little bit. But today, I think the goal of today's shir, I think really is to devote to this topic. What does halacha have to say about price regulation? Is price regulation something we should be doing? Is it something we can be doing? Is it something which is forbidden? And I think, unfortunately, we know that we'll talk a little bit of background. Okay, I want to just frame the issue a little bit before we go into all the details. What I want to also do is I want to try and just preempt all of this. We know that the OU is a tax-exempt organization. And what that means on a practical level is we're not supposed to talk politics. So as a disclaimer, right? It's a disclaimer. This is not political. It's not meant to be political. But I think it's important that we understand what does halacha have to say about this topic. So what are the goals of the reform? Let's start with the basics. So they wanted to, what are the goals? They want to try to break up monopolies. We know milk is one of the products in Israel which is regulated. All the prices on milk, for the standard milk that you find in the stores, is regulated. There's a set price. Now that price happens to be a little bit of a high price. We know food in Israel isn't always cheap, but milk in particular is a relatively high price. But it's standardized, it's set. And what they want to try and do is remove that price regulation with the goal of breaking up monopolies, preventing major local dairies like Tnuva and TORAH and Strauss from monopolizing the market, and try as much as possible to enable smaller farmers to have other groups also be able to join the market. Now, what they also want to do is they want to lower the tariffs on milk being exported into the country, which would mean imported into the country, which would mean that the price of milk also would go down. So both of those things would help the price of milk go down. We're not going to have a set price of milk, which would be very good for the economy and would be very good for the average consumer in saving their wallet. On the other hand, right, the main argument against doing this reform would be that all the local farmers who aren't big businesses might not be able to compete, and they might go out of business. So it would be very good for the average consumer in saving their pockets. For the local farmers, they might suffer tremendously, and some of them would have to go out of business. In fact, part of the package, what they're trying to do in the reform, is they want to actually supplement the income of these poor farmers who wouldn't be able to continue with their work. They want to actually supplement their income to either enable them to continue or buy them a little bit of time that they could find other work.
I have a question about it. So the farmers today all have to sell their milk to these big monopolies. Is that what happens?
So I'll tell you like this. I don't know all the details of how this works, but in a nutshell, I think what's going to end up happening is that these small farmers are going to have to close up shop because most of them won't be able to compete with these very low prices that are going to be set, that are going to be beginning to sprout. And as a result, what might have to happen is they'll be bought out by the bigger companies. That's number one. So it's a very, very complex issue. I don't want to discuss the politics in great length. I don't know about the politics in great length. Okay? But I do want to discuss what the Torah has to say about this. And if you look very carefully, we know we were just talking about this last night, actually. My parents and I, we were discussing the fact that if you look now at the state of Israel, in what it is, and what it represents, you'll notice the fact that we have a government which isn't exactly religious. What does that mean for us? When they originally established the state of Israel, one of their goals was they wanted to have, many of the Rabbanim were making a very big push to have a religious government, to follow all the Dinei Torah in the government. Now, I grew up in America, okay? In America, we believe in the separation of church and state, but it doesn't have to be like that in Israel. We could have them be more together. We could have some of the laws of the Torah, the Dinei Torah, be implemented on a practical level. But unfortunately, as we've seen, that's not exactly what developed 100%. We do have religious authority regarding issues of personal status, right? Marriage and divorce, gerus, right? Conversions. In these areas, 100%. Baruch Hashem, it's a beautiful thing. But in other areas, we see it's a little bit more complicated. And the halacha isn't necessarily always being implemented properly. I remember Rabbi Moshe Hauer, alav shalom, I once got to hear him speak on Tisha B'Av. And every Tisha B'Av, those who got to hear him speak know, he used to choose one character who lived not that long ago, and he'd speak about one particular Jewish important personality and go into great detail. But what an impact they made for the Jewish community. And I think one of the last few years before he passed away, he chose to speak about Rabbi Yitzchak Halevi Herzog. Now, those who know Rabbi Herzog, not the current Rabbi Herzog, okay? This is his grandfather, actually. Okay, he was the first chief rabbi of Israel. And this is one of the things he pushed for tremendously. And unfortunately, it did not come 100% to fruition, but he wanted it very, very badly. Also, similarly, Rav Kook's son also was one of the big proponents of pushing to try and have an agenda of halacha in the government. So it's something we don't have 100%, but it's something we have to be thinking about. And I think the very first step in implementing this and accomplishing this goal is we first have to have the knowledge. Because what ends up happening, you have a governing body, the people who are running the government, how are you going to implement halacha if you don't even know what halacha says? How are we going to begin to think about these halachic questions if we don't first know what the halacha has to say about these broad topics? So I think the first step is the knowledge, and that's what we're here for today. The first step is to discuss practically what does the halacha have to say about these topics, which seemingly Choshen Mishpat is like removed from halacha. People talk about halacha, they think about kiddush, sukkah, lulav, right? They think about mitzvah we do in shul, but who's thinking about Choshen Mishpat? Who's thinking about civil law? But there's a whole section of the Shulchan Aruch, a quarter of the Shulchan Aruch is devoted to civil law. And I think that's why it's important to discuss today. So we have here in source number 1, the Torah places tremendous emphasis on integrity in one's business. The Torah says, Lo yeh bechisacha eben v'aven gedola u'ktana. We're not supposed to have dishonest weights and measurements, right? And in fact, if you look carefully, what does it say? Lo yeh bechisacha, and then the next verse says, Lo yeh beveitzecha efa ve'efa. You're not supposed to have, even in your house, dishonest weights and measurements. So it's interesting, you can't even own dishonest weights and measurements. You should have a complete, right, and righteous, right, types of measurements. It says again, Leman, why? So we have here bracha number 1. If we're careful in our weights and measurements, we'll have a long life on this world. Specifically, referring probably to Eretz Yisrael. Beautiful thing, we'll have a long life in Eretz Yisrael. And then we're told the converse. It's considered a perversion, it's considered inappropriate, anyone acts otherwise, And then we're told, what seemingly doesn't seem to belong here, but the very next pasuk says, Zachor asher asa lecha Amalek, b'derech mitzidecha miMitzrayim. Remember what Amalek did to you when you left Mitzrayim. So, a few questions here. What's the connection between dishonest weights and measurements? And you'll notice another question. I bolded for you a few words here in the first source. We have here lo yeh lecha, it says twice, and then it says yeh lecha, or yeh lach. It says also twice. What is this emphasis on you shall not have and you shall have? Emphasizing again and again. So these are not my questions, these are actually Rashi's questions. If you look at source number 2, I put for you here Rashi, he says, Lo yeh lecha im asita kain, lo yeh lecha klum. The Torah is emphasizing not only you shall not have, but it's also telling you you will not have. In Hebrew, that's one of the amazing things when you learn about the Hebrew language. Every single, right, when you translate the phrase, it doesn't do it justice. Because lo yeh lecha can mean one of two things, right? It can mean you shall not have, but it can also mean you won't have. So if you do this, the Torah is hinting to you, if you do this, if you have dishonest weights and measurements in your home, you won't have. You're going to lose. You're going to lose out. And contrastingly, if you do this, if you have honest weights and measurements, yelach, the next Rashi, imal sita kain, yelach harbe. So you want to know the secret to financial success? Being honest. That's it. We have to be honest in our business. The Torah says right here, black on white. Why then does the Torah juxtapose this with the mitzvah of Amalek? So Rashi tells us, Im shakarta b'midot of mishkalot. If you are dishonest in your weights and measurements, havidoreg miguriyeh ha'oyev. Then you need to be worried, you need to be concerned about the enemy coming to attack. Rashi cites other psukim in Mishlei to back up this idea, this theory that he presents here from the Tanchuma, the Midrash Tanchuma, that if a person is dishonest in weights and measurements, a person is dishonest in his business, that's when Amalek comes to attack. That's when the enemy comes to get us. Which is very interesting, right? Here we are fighting a war constantly. Israel's constantly in a state of war, right? I have brothers in the army now that keep being called back to Miluim over and over again. It's crazy. Why is this happening? Why are we in a constant state of war? We have to be honest in our business. We have a little bit of a hint here, perhaps, of what we can do, perhaps, to fix the situation. So it's interesting, again, so if we're honest in our weights and measurements, if we're honest in our business, again, we'll be financially successful, we'll have a long life in the land of Eretz Yisrael, and the enemy won't attack. Sounds like a beautiful brachot. So here the Torah is emphasizing to us how important it is that we have to be honest in our business. Here, one more source I'm going to give you from the Chumash before we go into the rabbinic sources here. If you look at source number 3, we have the pasuk in Vayikra, "V'chi timkaru mimkar la'amitecha, o kanomi al'amitecha, al tonu ishad achiv." The Torah here tells us that there's a prohibition of ona. When you buy and sell, how do you determine what's the appropriate price? How much is too much of a markup? How much is inappropriate? Where we're going ahead and we're adding, we're making the prices a little bit too high. The Torah says, "Al tonu ishdachi." If it's going to lead to onah, that you're charging over or undercharging more than 1/6 of the market value, it's considered a biblical prohibition. A biblical prohibition. We're not allowed. The Torah is very clear. We're not allowed to over or undercharge more than 1/6. Right? So over and charging obviously on the seller's end is the prohibition, and to undercharge more than 1/6 would be unfair for the seller.
Who determines market value?
That is the subject of tremendous debate. The question was, who determines market value? Okay, that is an excellent question. I've heard many shiurim on this topic. We're not going to do that today because that's a big topic. For now, we'll just call it market value. But that's a very important topic. And there's also a bigger question, which is, does every product have a market value? If I go ahead and I sell my property in Har Nof, does that have a set amount of is there a set price for that? Do we find set prices for karka? Is there such a thing? So the Gemara is very clear. By karka, we assume ein onah l'karkaot. There's no such thing as onah by karkaot. There's no market value when it comes to real estate. It's interesting. So certain things we see a precedent from this idea that not everything even has a market value. So what products have a market value? We have to begin to discuss, and we have to begin to think about. What I want to discuss, though, is, you can think about this a little bit. Obviously, this prohibition won't even begin to get off the ground if the Beit Din, or the governing body, okay, goes ahead and they fix a price. Because if they have a set price, if they fix a price, then obviously there's no no. So this prohibition potentially could be avoided if we go ahead and we have a set price. So again, is it the right thing to do? Is it not the right thing to do? You can discuss. But on a basic level, if you have such a system in place, obviously there would be no prohibition of ONA. There would be no concern about overcharging. It's set.
Maybe the government price is already overcharging.
Okay, right. So that's right. That's a very important point. Maybe perhaps we could argue that the price is too high. In fact, that's the point of the reform. They believe that it is too high and we have to lower it. So what's the appropriate thing to do? So what I want to do now, I want to switch over a little bit. Let's go to some of the rabbinic sources. And the first question we have to ask is, should the government play a role in price regulation? So the Gemara in Baba Batya discusses the pasuk we just read in source number 1. It says, Lo yeh lecha. What do we learn from this phrase, this pasuk? Mlamed shema'amidin agar damin lemidot ve'en ma'amidin agar damin l'sha'arim. There's a requirement that the Beit Din has an obligation to appoint inspectors, agar damin, or inspectors, for midot, for weights and measurements. However, there is not a requirement to appoint inspectors for to determining the market, for ensuring that people are keeping to the market price. Which means, if someone has, just let's say go into OUisrael, right? You check their scale, right? And the scale is off balance. It would be the responsibility of the Beit Din to appoint someone to have an inspector to go and check to make sure those scales are accurate, right? Contrastingly, if the OUisrael is selling for, let's say they're selling apples at a ridiculous price, is it the job of the Beit Din to go ahead and determine whether that price of apples is correct? Is it within the range of normalcy? No, they're not required to do that. However, this point was hotly contested. We're going to see now many Tanaim and Amoraim who weighed on this issue of whether perhaps we also need to go ahead and appoint inspectors even for determining the proper market value is being set. So if someone goes ahead and again, Ben Nasiya felt they need to appoint also for the Sha'arim, they also need to have people appointed for this task. Amar le Shmuel le Karna. So Shmuel, who's the expert on this topic? The expert on this topic, we know Rav and Shmuel used to always debate. They're study partners and they used to always debate back and forth. And Rav was known for being someone who we've always passed on like Rav when it comes to matters of Isser. So you want to know, is my Fleishik pan still Fleishik? Who do you go to? Rav. It's a matter of Isser v'heter. If you want to know, when it comes to areas of mamunus though, if you want to know for monetary disputes, who to go to, who's the expert in monetary disputes? Shmuel. So Shmuel, his opinion should be taken with great gravity here. He said to one of his students, to Karna, he said, that's his name of the student, Karna, he said, Pok taniwahu, please tell the Beit Nasiya, please inform them, ma'amidin argamot lamidot ve'in ma'amidin margamim l'sha'arim, that it's incorrect. We only go ahead and appoint inspectors to determine whether the scales are correct. That's it. That's all we're allowed to do. And he was very insistent on this. Why? He felt that's what the pasuk says. The Torah tells us, Lo yeh lecha evin va'avin. That's what we have to check. That's what we have to make sure people are doing. That's what we have to enforce. To have honest weights and measurements. But to go ahead and make sure that people are selling according to market value, that's beyond the scope of Beit Din. That's what he felt. Well, let's look at what happened at the end of the story then. Last, second paragraph in source 4. Nafak darish lahu. So Karna went ahead, and despite what Shmuel said, despite Shmuel's request, he went out and taught Ma'amidin argadamin bein lamidot bein l'sha'arim. He didn't do what Shmuel said. He said we have to go ahead and appoint inspectors for both. Amar le. Shmuel heard what was going on. He said, Mashemecha, what's your name? He said, Karna. You knew his student's name. But he asked him, what's your name? Karna. Tebuk le Karna be'ene. Does anyone know the other meaning of Karen? Karna? Karen? That's right. A horn. He said a horn, play on his name, a horn should grow forth from your eye. Wow. Nafkali karna bene, and sure enough, that's what happened. Shmuel's curse came about. Again, I don't know if it's like a big horn. It's probably like a little growth, okay? But a horn grew forth from his eye. So what was Karna doing? He went against his Rabbi, he went against Shmuel. How could he do this? He isn't just pulling this out of thin air. V'iu command samar, who did Karna hold by? Tihad amar Rami bar Chama, amar Rabbi Yitzchak. And here I bolded it for you. Ma'amidin argardamin lebein lemidot bein l'sharim mipnei haramayim. He says, unfortunately, we live in a very, very distorted world. There are people who cheat, there are people who are dishonest in their business, and Rami bar Chama, the source of Karna's deen, Rami bar Chama felt, for this reason, we have to take extra judicial measures, we have to go ahead and go beyond what the Torah tells us, and we are required as a Beit Din to appoint to make sure that people are selling according to fair market value. And in fact, if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, that's how we paskin. Even though Shmuel was the expert, even though Shmuel was the Rabbi, we were told here that we paskin like Rami bar Chama, we paskin like his student Karna, and we go ahead and we are meant to regulate prices. It is the responsibility of the Beit Din to regulate prices.
It's very socialistic and communist.
Right? So how far does this go? Maybe we're turning into socialist group here. Maybe it's communism. Maybe it's inappropriate.
Sometimes the
We were socialist.
market controls it because, things get sold that are as they're required and as the need is there.
Very good, very good. So we're going to see soon that this power, in some ways, it's very, very broad, and in some ways, it's extremely limited. And we're going to go back and forth, because obviously, Chazal don't want us to turn them into a communist society, not a socialist society, not a communist society. And we're going to see, in some ways, it's a very, very broad scope of power, and in some ways, it's extremely limited. So let's go through one by one. We have here in source number 5, we have two sources, 5 and 6, tell us 2 examples of the extreme power that is given to Beit Din and their extreme responsibility that they have to make sure to maintain fair market prices. Here we have a story in the Mishnah in Kritot. Okay, a kan, right, is a set of birds that a person would be required to bring, a woman would be required to bring after she gives birth. Okay, so there was an incident which happened in Yerushalayim where the price of these birds went up to dinarei zahav, which is the equivalent of 25 dinarei kesef. Okay, it's a lot of money. A lot of money. So basically what was happening, unfortunately there are people who are jacking up the price, right? All these bird sellers, they knew that they have all these women coming in, they want to buy their birds every time they have a birth, and so they decided they're going to jack up the price, and then they'll have to buy them for whatever the price they set. They had a monopoly on the price. So Amar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, Hama'on hazeh. Okay, this place is referring to the Beit HaMikdash. This is the Lashon of Shvuah. He's vowing in the name of the Beit HaMikdash, in the name of the temple. Lo alin halayla ad yu b'dinarim. He says, I'm swearing right now that I'm not going to let the night pass. I'm not going to sleep tonight until the price goes back down, until the price is b'dinarim. Nichnas lebeit din v'limed. He went into court that same day and he taught. Ha'isha sheyesh aleh chamesh leidot v'adaot. If a woman had 5 births, 5 certain births. Okay, what does it mean certain? Sometimes if a woman miscarries, it's unclear whether she's required to bring this korban. So so 5 births, 5 real births. So how many korbanos does she need to bring? Chamesh zivot v'adaot meviyah korban echad. She only needs to bring 1 korban. And she does not need to bring any additional korbanot. What happened now? The market price dropped. There wasn't such a great need. The price went all the way down to 1/4 of a dinar kesef. So it went down in price by it's now 1/25 of the original price. Sorry, 1/100th of the original price.
100, right.
So it's wild. So he got the price to drop tremendously in the same day by just teaching 1 halacha.
Demand,
Now,
supply and demand.
supply and demand. The question begins though, let's think about this. Was he really allowed to do that? How many korbanot does the Torah tell you have to bring per birth? One. And he went ahead and he said, no, if you have 5 births, you only have to bring 1 korban. How is he allowed to do that?
To bring it before or after? How do you know when to bring it?
So you bring it at the end after all 5. You bring one korban, presumably. But the question begins, so how can you do that? So the Bartanura explains here, wild, he says that even though there's a Torah requirement to bring 5 korbanot, in such a great situation of need, where the mitzvah will be lost entirely. Because what's going to happen? If the price is skyrocket, the price is so high, then people can't even afford the korbanot, what's going to happen? There are going to be poor women who won't bring. And the worst is they don't bring any korbanot. What's going to happen? They don't bring any korbanot. They're not even allowed to eat kodshim. But what are they going to eat? What are they going to eat? Some of these women, they're married to kohanim. Some of them have to eat kodshim. That's what their food is. They're going to end up eating it betuma. So much greater travesty is going to emerge if they went ahead and didn't take action. So says Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, I have to do something about this. He went ahead and he, quote unquote, violated the laws of the Torah. He violated the laws of the Torah, so to speak, on a temporary basis until the prices dropped. That's what the Bartanura explains this Mishnah. It's wild. Now, not everyone agrees with this explanation. The Mochet Shlomo takes a little bit of a different spin. He says, what does it mean, ve'en ashar ve'achova? He says that when the Mishnah said that the rest are not obligatory, it means that they need not bring others in order to enable her to eat kodsh. She still has to bring them. But in order to eat kodshim, she only needs to eat one. She only needs to bring 1 korban. So a little bit of a different spin. That is the halacha. In order to eat kodshim, she only needs to bring 1 korban. But is she still required to bring the other 4? Yes. So according to the Mochet Shlomo, it's a little bit less of a chiddush, right? But the Bartanura's explanation is wild. It's mind-boggling. He's actually changing the laws of the Torah, so to speak, right? He's going ahead and saying, Sheva al ta'aseh, we don't have to go ahead, we don't have to bring these korbanot, even though there's a mitzvah d'oraita, in order to bring down the market price. Wow. Similarly, if you look at the next source in number 6, we have a Gemara in Sukkah here. Tanya Rabbi Shmuel Omer, we have here 3 opinions regarding what is the requirements to bring on sukkahs. We know we have dalad minim, right, the 4 species, and there's a big question here, how many of each species we bring. So we know classically we have 1 lula, we have 1 etrog, we have 3 adasim, and 2 aravot. But it wasn't always agreed upon. And this is the source of the debate right here. The Braita tells us, Rabbi Shmuel says, Pri eitz hadar echad, you bring 1 etrog, kapot marim echad, 1 lulav, anaf eitz avot shlosha, you have 3 hadasim, arvei nachel shtayim. Va'afiu shnayim k'tumim, ve'echad she'eno katum. He says, and even if you have 2, now he's going back to the hadassim, you have 2 hadassim, which are, the top is cut off, and 1 which is not, that's okay. So you need to have 3, 2 in not such great condition. As long as 1 is in good condition, that's enough. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, shlosha v'afiu shloshtan k'tumim. He says, no. He says you need to have 3, and even if the 3 of them, the tops they're cut off, right? He says that's good. So he agrees with the number, but he's a little bit more lenient regarding the number that needs to be in good condition. And Rabbi Kiva says, perhaps the most lenient, we'll see in a second it's not. Rabbi Kiva says, you have 1 of everything. Keshem shalula v'echad, ve'etrog echad, kach hadas echad, ve'reva echad. 1 of everything. That's the final opinion of Rabbi Akiva. So, how do we paskin? There are 3 opinions, 3 rabbis. How do you know what to do? So Amar Rabbi Huda Amar Shmuel, halacha k'Rabbi Tarfon. We follow the middle opinion that you're supposed to have 3 hadasim, but if 2, and even if all 3 of them are not in such great condition, that suffices. Now halacha myself, just tell you a parenthetical point. We don't exactly do that, right? We know we're very careful about our hadasim today. We're very careful. They should all look beautiful. They should all be a hadar. We're very careful about them. But nonetheless, here we have the Gemara tells us the opinion of Shmuel, that the halacha follows Rabbi Tarfon. V'azdel Shmuel atamet, amar lehu Shmuel, v'hanu demisabli asa. He went ahead, and we know this is Shmuel, v'shitato, this is what Shmuel always did, because he told the merchants of the hadasim, ashvu v'zabinu, go ahead, make sure that you set your prices not too high. He was very clear with them. You have to lower your prices, make them what they're supposed to be at the market value, V'ilo darshina l'chuk Rabbi Tarfon. And he says, if not, if you don't lower your prices, I'm going to reveal to people that they're actually allowed to have less muhudar hadassim. So, again, we find that the rabbis are using the halacha to enable people, to enable the market to be a set, the correct rate. So I'll tell you, if you look at the Rambam and you look at Tosfot, so they all hold like Rabbi Shmuel. They think that really we should follow Rabbi Shmuel, which means you have to have a higher standard of the hadassim. Only one of them is not allowed to be so great. If you look in, however, which means, again, according to the Rambam and Tosfot, that what was going on here is that he was willing to bend over backwards. He was willing to follow a more lenient opinion, right, to go back to the Me'ikar Adin, in order to bring the market's value, the market price, where it's supposed to be. In contrast, we have the Or Sameach, says the Rabbi Tarfon really is the Me'ikar Adin. So different approaches here. What was exactly what Shmuel was doing? Some say Shmuel was actually changing the halacha, so to speak, and some say that Shmuel was he was following the halacha, but on a more basic level. He is teaching people the more basic deen in order as a temporary means to enable the market prices to go down. But either way you slice it, you see how much the Rabbanim bend over backwards to try and make the prices fair. It's very important. How are we passing halacha, Max? Yeah.
Yes, I'm just curious about the regulating of market values. Was that for everything? The examples that I brought over here, Kinim, for example, a woman has to bring. There isn't any getting out. Dalit Minim, you have to have. Was talking about what about
Correct.
Kellogg's one?
We're gonna get there. It's coming up. We'll get there. B'Zras Hashem. Okay. If you look how do we pass halacha Ma'aseh on this, if you look in the Mishnah Berurah, okay, this is amazing. I always love this. The Torah is connected. Every little piece and every little detail is connected. Where do you find the answer to this question? You look in the Mishnah Berurah in Hilchot Shabbos. One of the first places in Hilchot Shabbos, Simon Rishman Bet, right at the beginning, the Mishnah Berurah is talking about how we talked about last week. We're supposed to enjoy Shabbat. There's 4 mitzvot on Shabbat we mentioned: Zachor, Shamor, right? Kavod and Oneg, 2 from the Torah, 2 from the Rabbanim. So Oneg, one of the mitzvot from the Rabbanim, to enjoy Shabbos, one of the requirements, the Mishnah Berurah writes, he says if you enjoy fish on Shabbos, you should have fish on Shabbos. And he even says, he even goes so far, he says if you enjoy fish, you should have fish at all the meals, he says. Have it for all 3 meals. What ends up happening? You have fish for all 3 meals, and everyone's doing this. The price goes up. The Mishnah Berurah says, what do you do if all of a sudden the price is going up, there's such a strong need, and the suppliers realize they have a monopoly on this market, and they jack up the prices? What do you do? Very good. So the Mishnah Berurah writes that in such a case where you're required to do, the Chazal have a requirement, they're obligated to tell people not to buy fish. Not to buy fish. Now, fish is something, we don't really need fish. You can fulfill the mitzvahs of Shabbos without fish, okay? You can get by just fine. You're supposed to enjoy Shabbat, you're supposed to enjoy good foods, but if you enjoy other things, wonderful. You don't have to have fish. So the Be'er Heitev, he quotes 2 opinions though about how to do this. The Be'er Heitev says, it depends. It's not on the source sheet. I don't want to overwhelm everyone with all the sources. I didn't put everything on. So it says the Mishnah Berurah, he quotes from the Be'er Heitev, that if they raise the price by more than 1/3, in that case, no one should buy fish. Says the Eliyah Rabbah a little bit differently. He says, even if they raise the price by less than 1/3, more than the market value, still, no one should buy fish if there's a need to help the poor, if there's a need to help the Aniyim. Which means that you see Beit Din is able to step in to stop the raising of the prices, even if it's perhaps not going up too much. It's not more than 1/3 over the market value. Okay? If it's in order to help enable the Aniyim to buy food for Shabbos. That's how we paskin. That's the Mishnah Berurah writes. So we see so far that there is a precedent for enabling the Beit Din, or perhaps the governing body also, to step in and try and control the market a little bit. There is something that we can do. We have to take some type of measures, and now we're not even gotten to having a set price for certain products, but at the very least, that we have to see what they have to do something, either it's teach a halacha, or it's tell people to stop buying, whatever they're going to do, they have to step in somehow to try and regulate prices. Okay.
There was years ago here, a strike on cottage cheese. Long time ago, remember that? And the price went down. They did.
So sometimes it works. Yeah. That's a great, yeah. But sometimes it works. Sometimes it can help. You go ahead and, conduct a strike. Sure. If you look at source number 7, I want to switch over now a little bit. So we haven't gotten practically halacha l'maaseh what we do. We have a lot to discuss still. So we have to discuss, first of all, are we ever allowed to hoard food and essentials? And are farmers, right, the producers, ever permitted to create unfair prices? So if you look at the Gemara in Baba Batra, we're told, Rav says, Oseh adam et kabo otza. A person can make his own personal, right, his own personal kav, his area of land, an otza, a storage house. Which means, yes, sounds like you can hoard. Tani nami hachi, there's a practice that supports this. It says, it seems to be the opposite at first. Ein otzrin perot. We're not allowed to store fruit. Which things are you not allowed to store? Dvarim sheish behen chayin nefesh. Things which are essential products. Essential products. Those are the things we're not allowed to hoard. Kegon, they give a few examples. Yenot, wine, shemanim, oils, uslatot, flour. The basic essentials we are not permitted to hoard. Aval, tvalin, kamo, piopalin, mutar. Or kamon, piopalin, mutar. But when it comes to spices, cumin, pepper, those things you would be permitted to hoard. Because do you need pepper to live? You don't really need pepper to live, okay? Despite the fact that all the restaurants, for some reason, they give you a little pepper right on the table, right? You don't need it to live. You can go without it. It's not essential. But medri mamurim, when does all this apply? Belokeach min hashuk. That's when you go ahead and you buy things from the marketplace. Ava b'machnis mishalom mutar. So here we are told, this is all with regards to the buyer. If I am a buyer and I go ahead and I want to buy out all the milk in the store, that you can't do, right? That you can't do, right? We can't go ahead and buy out all the milk in the store. That's not appropriate. But if I'm a milk producer, right? If I'm a farmer and I want to hold on to my milk, seemingly mutar. The Rabbi seems to say you're permitted to do that. Now, really, you can hold on to all the milk? You're a farmer, you can hold on to all the milk? I produced it, why not? So the Shulchan Aruch says, no, come on, you can't go that far. We'll look at the next source. Number 8, chayavim beitin la'amid mamonam al asharim, mamonim al asharim. So first of all, regarding the first issue I mentioned before, right? The beitin is obligated to go ahead and appoint officers to make sure to enforce price control. They were not going ahead and overcharging too much in the stores. Now, is this an obligation or is this something they're allowed to do? Well, what's the purpose? He says you're obligated, but why? So this way, a person will not go ahead and get as much harvacha, as much profit as he desires. Because a person should not go ahead and profit too much on things which are basic necessities. Kigon, yenot, manim, uslatot, as we mentioned, flour, wine, oils, ela shtut. What is he allowed to profit? What's considered fair profit? 1/6. 1/6 is considered the set amount, as we saw by the halacha of Onah. You're allowed to go ahead and raise, you have to make a profit. So you're allowed to go ahead and profit 1/6 of the value of the item. 1/6 of the value of the item you're allowed. B'medri mamurim, when does this apply? B'mocher schorato b'yachad, below TORAH. If you are a wholesaler, right, you're selling without difficulty, you're a wholesaler. Aval chenvani, but if you are a merchant, hamocher schorato me'at me'at, and you sell little by little, you're a shop owner, you're a shopkeeper. In that case, shamin lo tircho v'cho yitziotav, u'motar alehem yarviach shtut. Then in that case, you can make a little bit more of a profit. Because for you, it's more difficult. You're in the store for a certain amount of hours. It takes a long time to sell your goods. You're not buying it from a wholesaler. So for you, you're allowed to, in addition to the 1/6 of the value of the item, you're allowed to get also 1/6 of the value of, in addition to that, you're allowed to also charge for the value of your time of your work, right? and the expenditures that are necessary in order for you to sell your goods.
Is the upper limit 1/3 as you had mentioned earlier in the Mishnah Berurah?
So 1/3 is a little bit different. 1/3 is regarding the requirement of the Beit Din to step in if someone's charging 1/3 more than this number, right? So you take the 1/6 what they're allowed to sell, right? That helps you get to the appropriate market value. If they're charging 1/3 more than that, that's when the Beit Din sometimes has to step in, and they might have to go ahead and
Sounds
do one of these other methods we were discussing.
fixed prices.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, so far we learned you're allowed to get a sixth. You're allowed to go ahead, right? The proper appropriate price is a 1/6, depending on whether you're a wholesaler, 1/6 of the item itself, or if you're a private seller, 1/6 of the 1/6 of the item plus the expenditures and the effort that you put into selling it. Now, when does this apply though? B'medrim amarim b'shalo ukar ashar, aval im ukar ashar mechor kefi hayoker. But when does this all apply? When the price of the goods, right, the price of the market value is not extremely high. But if all of a sudden the market value jumped, which means, what does that mean practically? Let's say it used to be that the price of, say the price of apples, right? You could buy, a pound of apples for, to make it easy numbers. Okay, sorry, kilo of apples, thank you. Okay, I'm still in my American mindset here, okay? Baruch Hashem, if you're reminding me. Okay, you can buy a kilo of apples to use easy numbers. A kilo of apples for 10 shekel. We just got the shekel, right? Okay, for 10 shekel. And all of a sudden, now the price jumps, right? The price jumps, and you as the seller already bought from the wholesaler your kilo of apples for 10 shekel. Now the price jumps though. Right now, it happens to be the going rate for apples is way, way higher. Let's say it's already 20 shekel. So that's way more than a sixth. That's way more. So are you allowed to sell for 20 shekel? Says the Shulchan Aruch. If that's the current going rate, even though you bought it for much less, wonderful. You'll make a bigger profit. You're allowed to do that. That's on the books. V'hani mili heichet ika beitin teparshu lekulu mochrim mizvuni hachi. When does this apply? That you can sell it more than 1/6 of what you bought it. That's if the Beit Din went ahead and established that this is the proper price this is the going rate now for the sellers to sell it. Nonetheless, if all the other merchants are going ahead and selling for a higher price, but the Beit Din didn't say that's the set price, doesn't matter. You're still allowed to go ahead and charge the same amount as everyone else. You don't have to lose out just because other people are violating the halacha and selling for more. If everyone's selling for this amount, you as the seller, you are allowed also to sell for the higher amount. Interesting, right? So we don't punish the good students, so to speak, right? We don't punish those who are doing right.
Oh, exactly that. Just really briefly, supposing in college, everyone is cheating. Okay, one person is not cheating. According to this, would that student be able to cheat because he says, I have to be understanding of the student?
So I want to be fair, right? So we have to be very careful where we apply this, right? Right? That doesn't mean if everyone jumps off a bridge, I should jump off a bridge, obviously, right? I think my mother would be the first one to tell me that. But beyond that, I think we have to also think about, right, on a practical level here, what's going to happen if this guy goes ahead and sells so it's a fair question actually, right? Because here you could make a living without that. It's true. But the Shulchan Aruch says, in this case, you're not required to do that. We have to know each area of halacha is a little bit different. It's a little more nuanced. But here, again, the Shulchan Aruch is giving us permission to sell at the higher rate. I think you'll see in the next halacha that there is a little bit of a limitation on this. Right? If you look at the next source, okay, this is just the same siman, just a few sifim later. The Shulchan Aruch continues here, and he tells us that there's a little bit of a limitation. Number one, Ein otzrin perot sheish ben chayin nefesh be'eretz Yisrael, v'chein b'chol makom shrubo Yisrael. You are not allowed to hoard produce in Israel or anywhere there's the majority of the Jewish population. B'medrim u'murim v'lokech me'ashuk. That's if you buy it from the market. Aval ve'etzor hagadol b'shalo mutar. But again, as we mentioned previously, if it's your own private produce that you put together, then it's permitted. Uvishnat batzoret, however, in a time of famine, lo yetzor yoter mikdei parnasat beito v'shana. If it's a time of famine, you should not go ahead and store more than what you need for that year. So number one, can you hoard?
Yes.
Yes, if it's yours. Are there any limitations on how much you can hoard?
Yes.
Yes, you're not allowed to hoard more than what your family needs if it's a time of famine. Which means if people don't really need it, if there's plenty of produce, then you could continue to hoard. It's my produce, right? If people really need it though, if there's a time of famine, then we're not allowed to hoard more than what your family needs for the year. Now, Rishayim b'nei ha'ir lakutz lahem shar v'kol devar shirtzu. So here we have, very interesting, look at the wording here. That, we're told here, Rishayim, the government body, right? The people of the town, right? Who are the leaders of the town, obviously. They are permitted to go ahead and set a market value, v'kol devar shirtzu, for anything they want. Notice he's not limiting it now to the staples. He's not limiting it to flour and wine. He's expanding it a little bit. Okay, we're going to see soon, based on the next source, this is a special takana that they have here, based primarily on Hefker Beitin Hefker, that the Beitin is allowed to go ahead, and even for other items, as they see it necessary, they can go ahead and they're allowed, not required, they're allowed to step in and set prices for any item they view necessary. Again, is it a requirement? It's not a requirement. Should they be doing it? You have to ask your economics. But again, are they allowed to do it? Yes, they're allowed to do it. And they can even administer penalties for those that go ahead and violate these set laws that they've made. So again, can the government body step in? Yes, they're allowed to do it. Should they step in? We'll have to see. That's a little bit more complicated. Okay, but again, should they step in? We already discussed that if there's such a need, if there's essentials that people are not able to get because they're overcharging, then they have to step in and they're obligated. So there are cases where the government does need to step in. Now it's ironic because here, right, what do we have going on in our market? What's going on in our case?
The government is setting the high price.
The government is setting the high price, but if you think about it, right, they're not setting the high price to help the consumer,
No, help the farm.
to help the farmers,
No, help the monopolies.
and help the monopolies. So we have here, it's very interesting. It's not for the consumer, this price that they've set. It's a very interesting dynamic, right? It's a very interesting dynamic. So again, is the Beit Din allowed to set a price for essentials? Yes. But here, it's a very different type of price that they've set. It's a very different type of price that they've set. So we might argue that, right, that's the reform. They're trying to go ahead and get rid of this. That maybe it's inappropriate with the way they've done it. Okay, so let's look. We have to go through two more sources here. Let's see if we can squeeze it in. We have the Rambam in source number 10. And then I want to try and do one last topic if we have time. We'll try and squeeze in one last topic. We'll see what we can get to. The Rambam writes in Hilchot Mechira, he quotes that Kfar be'arnu she'anosev enotin be'emuna v'amar kach v'kach ani mistaker ein lo hanaya. Okay, one of the essential rules for Onah is we're not means, right? Let's review. We're not allowed to charge more than a sixth of the going rate as a seller. But one of the essential principles behind this is that if you verbalize, if people know what is the going rate, and you communicate that to them, and they say, even still, I want to buy it, no issue of Onah. So if people know this is what it really costs, but I'm willing to pay more for whatever reason, then it's okay. Right? What you're not allowed to do is to mislead them. And they think the price is whatever you're saying, and really the price is much less. And you don't communicate with them, that's a big problem.
It's like Israel consumers.
Etrogim, you said. Yeah. So etrogim sales. So I think people know that that's not exactly what the etrog costs, right? It doesn't cost that much to really produce than etrog. But again, people know that's the going rate, and people know it's a special for the mitzvah, and people feel comfortable with it. So I think it's well known. So I think people are comfortable with that. Now, if you charge way more than the going rate, then already there, that's a little bit more fuzzy. I don't know if that might be an actual issue of at a certain point. Yeah. Okay, Rafiu Amar Zeh Lakachti Besava Uve'ester Ani Mocher Mutar. Even if you tell him, I bought this for just one salah and I'm going to sell it to you for 10. So you're honest, you're open. If he's willing to buy it, that's okay. Aval, but nonetheless, Beitin Chayavin Vivso Kasharim. Even though on an individual level that would be okay, that would be permitted, but the Beitin is obligated to step in and set a price. Well, Amid Shotim Lakach, and to appoint overseers, to appoint people who can practically be at the scenes where this is happening, and to make sure that no one's being cheated. They should only be allowed to gain 1/6 value, 1/6 above what they bought it for. That's what they should get as their wages. And you should not, the seller should not be able to gain more than 1/6. So again, on an individual level, the rule is, right, if as long as you communicate with him what it costs, you're okay. On a level of Beitin, though, they have to try and regulate the market a little bit to prevent people from profiting too much beyond what's appropriate. Okay, one last point, then I'll take a question. But this only applies to essentials, right, to the staples. Okay? Right, wine, oil. I think obviously milk would apply for today, I think for sure, milk as well. These spices, wow. For non-essentials, whatever you like. Wow. The Rambam is permitting us to go very far as a seller. Whatever you like. If it's a non-essential, no problem, he thinks. We don't have to step in. We have to have a free market. It's okay. It's good. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. One then two.
What the essentials are.
Yes, that's all our big question. I think for our purposes, we could just say milk for sure is an essential. Okay, spices, I would think maybe is an essential. He's saying no, even spices, that's not an essential. That's an explicit example here. So I think most things qualify as non-essentials. So again, free market is a value here. The Rambam is telling us we don't have to step in and watch every single transaction that happens. For most things, right? For most things that are non-essentials, we don't necessarily need to be stepping in. Yeah.
So two quick things. For non-food items, nobody does 6. Nobody could stay in business without doing that anymore. That's the first thing, because unless you add the thing, that's because you have to pay rent on a store and electric.
So we did mention. Let's be clear: 1/6
right
beyond as a seller.
Okay, right. So, but the question I have beyond that point that nobody does at 6 is that because it's a different world. Where did the 6 come from?
Yeah.
They must have had a reason saying a 6 out of 10, 12,
Yeah.
a 5th.
So a six. I don't want to go too much in detail, but if you look in the Mishnah and Baba Metzia, that's where they discuss the topic of now. I don't want to go too much into it because it's a whole topic in and of itself, but we'll save that for another year maybe. Okay, let's wrap up. Yeah, Moshe, Ruben, yeah.
So I thought that today would be bread.
Yeah. Bread, I think, is for sure a staple. Yeah. And you see, that's actually what they do. In Israel, there's a set price on milk and bread.
Plain bread.
That's what it is right now. Plain bread and plain milk. That's what they have right now. So you can see, again, it's a little bit of a makor here we have.
He only mentions edibles. What about if I need a car to get to work?
Great question. In Israel, if you ask most people, non-essential. That's the thing that most people would say in Israel. I live in Yerushalayim, I'm a little bit biased.
That's what I'm building.
There's so much, in Har Nof, the public, in Yerushalayim, the public transportation here is very good. Baruch Hashem. Not yet. No, not yet. But public transportation in Yerushalayim in general is very good. So I think, if you live in, Harish, you live down south, you live up north, okay, so it's a little bit more difficult, but we live in Yerushalayim, Baruch Hashem. Let's wrap up. I want to do one last source, and if we have time to discuss one last hot topic in this area. Okay, the Aruch HaShulchan, let's jump to the second paragraph. He says as follows: the Aruch HaShulchan, we know, was known for being, he told us the bottom line. Practically, halacha, what's the minhag, what do we do? Sometimes you can learn a whole sugya from top to bottom, from beginning to end, and you don't know what to do. You can learn all the sources, but still, practically, how do we paskin? So he puts it together, and he puts it together very nicely for us, and he also adds points that we need to be thinking about today. So let's read what he says. Second paragraph. For kol zeh, everything we've discussed. He says, number one, all of this only applies if the Beit Din has the authority and the ability to enforce the rules. Unfortunately, as we know today, Beit Din, right, our Rabbanim are given very little power. Very little power.
They have too much, according to some people.
According to some people, it's still too much, right? Still too much. Okay, now, what does that mean practically? I'll tell you in a second. The Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach has a tshuva on this. He says, bottom line, the Gemara and Baba Batra, Daf Tet Amud Aleph, tells us that the government, they go ahead, they're supposed to, what they're supposed to do, what's supposed to happen, is they're supposed to go ahead and get the approval of the local Beit Din, the local Rabbanim, in order to determine what's the appropriate prices for these items. But practically, he says, if the Rabbanim are not involved in this, which I think is definitely the case today, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach writes, he says if they're not involved in the field, then there's no need to receive this approval for regulating prices. So what do you see from this tshuva of Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach? Today, who becomes responsible? The government. Right? We treat them like an equivalent. The Rabbanim are not involved in this. The government is involved in this. They're doing the research. They're trying to find out what is the whole finance ministry, right? Trying to determine what are the appropriate prices for the market. So we regulate to them. They don't even need Beit Din's approval today. Okay? He says, Alval kashiyesh mochrim shlo yitzaitu. But if they're sellers, you're not going to listen anyways, let's say. You can't force them. You can't do anything about it. Then we don't, even though still there's some people who are going to listen to Beit Din, there's some people who are very devoted, and they're going to listen to the rabbis, even if they're not enforcing it. Still, we're not going to enforce our rules upon those yechidim. We're not going to enforce our rules upon those individuals who are going to listen regardless. Dilma yafsidum b'chinam, because maybe what's going to happen is you're not going to help fix the market. You're just causing these individual sellers to lose out. There's no purpose in that. Umihu, however, ima Beit Din yodim, if the Beit Din knows, sha'al yedeiken yichruchu gama acherim minkor kamohem, that if they have to sell at this lower price, then they're going to encourage their friends who are also selling in the same market to sell for that same lower price. Then yachrichu lashomim. Then you should force the listeners to go ahead, take action. They'll sell at the lower price, and then they'll encourage all those who are in the same market as them to do the same. So if the Beit Din has a means of controlling the market a little bit to help lower the prices for the economy, to boost the economy, then they're expected to do so. He says, but now, he says, now we have the opposite problem. What are these? I had to figure this out. I had to research this, what he meant here. He's referring to people who slash the prices. They slash the prices. Why? Try and put the other party out of business. They try and hurt the other parties. We have the opposite problem. It's not that they're raising the prices. They're lowering the prices so much that they're hurting the other sellers. In this case, we have the opposite problem. What do? He says first, he says Chazal permitted us to gain a sixth of af b'ochel nefesh, even for essentials. Certainly for other things. You have to gain even more for other things. He says, and he's crying out about this. How could it be? We're lowering the prices so much that you can't make a living. These poor farmers, right, who now can't make a living because they're fighting against this competition. And he concludes by telling us a nice quick summary. He says you can divide all the things we've discussed today, all the different categories that we sell, into 3 different groups. You have ochel nefesh, the essentials. Maskirim adshtut v'lo yoter, those you sell for a sixth and not more. Number 2, v'she'en b'hem ochel nefesh klal. If it's not ochel nefesh, it's not an essential. It's not related to a specific food need. You can get even double. You can get even more than double. That's permitted. And then finally, he talks about a third category, which we've yet to discuss. He calls it machshiri ochel nefesh. Wow. He puts this into a new category. He says spices, they're not essentially, we were talking about up until now 2 categories. You have essentials and everything else. He says it's a third category. There's things that are not essential, but they do help you a lot, right? They do, like spices, they make the food taste a lot better. He puts this in the middle category. He says for this, you're allowed to profit only up to a maximum of 100%, which is still a lot. But there is the cap. There is a cap on these things, and we have to be mindful of that cap. So I want to wrap up. I want to conclude. there's another hot topic and we're not going to get to today, but I want to just say the following. Baruch Hashem, we live in a very complex world with a lot going on. And I think it's a bracha that we live in such a world. We have the opportunity to think critically about how economics work, how halacha relates to economics, and we have to think practically what we're going to do, not only in our own personal business to be honest in our business, but we have to hope and we have to daven that Hashem should give us clarity to help others, to help the world, to be upstanding, to be an or goyim, to be a light unto the nations. That we should always be thinking mindfully about how to create the world in a better place. We should be all zocheh to live in a parnasa according to Allah.